Well, if you look at any type of list, if you Google or whatever it is, ChatGPT, who are the most influential people in the world that are alive right now? Okay, there's a certain name that you're going to continue to come back to. Okay, and a lot of us know who it is. His name is Elon Musk. And so a lot of us like to use or look at things that come from Elon Musk, like Tesla, but there's also a bunch of other companies that we know about, or maybe we don't know about, that he actually started. And so we know he started PayPal. That's what started this whole thing, and then he sold that. That turned into Tesla. He also started SpaceX, which is in a lot of ways taken NASA's role. He bought Twitter and turned that into something else, or I guess the same thing, whatever. Neuralink is another company he started. There's a company called The Boring Company. And what The Boring Company does is it does infrastructure and digs tunnels and all that stuff. And so he really has quite a diverse group of companies that he's now in charge of. And we also know that he's the richest person in the world. Okay, I don't know if he's still the richest person in the world, but he's up there. And so we like to focus on all these different things he's doing. Now, what's really interesting about Elon Musk is how he actually got to the point where he was, like his process or his method of how he became rich. Because if you start to look at some of his interviews or study what he says or how he thinks, he doesn't view himself as really being a complex or super diverse or varied owner of different companies. His process and how his mind works is very simple. Okay, he has a foundation of kind of a science-geared intellect. Oh, okay, well, spoiler alert. Science-geared intellect. And that's the foundation of his mind. Now, out of that foundation, all he does, like he's quoted saying, all I do is ask myself one question, which leads to my next action. And the question is, what would most benefit human existence? So Elon Musk starts with the foundation of being super smart and science-minded, and he goes, what's the next thing that I can do that's going to benefit human existence? And then he does that. Now, we now know all of the different companies and all of the different things that are a result of his mind working in this way that he thinks are going to benefit human existence. Okay, now he's wrong in all of them because he's missing the main thing that's actually going to benefit human existence. But we love to focus on Tesla and we love to focus on SpaceX and all these different things. We like to see the money that he has. Like that's what we think of when we think of Elon Musk. But I think that we're missing, there you go, you're missing the actual process of how he got to that point. Now, why am I saying this? Well, all of the accomplishments and all of the things that he has been successful in and that we like to focus on really boil down to a simple foundation and a simple question that leads him to doing the next thing. Like that's all that he's doing. It's quite simple. And the reason I bring this up is because this morning, what we're going to see and understand, and I'm going to say it over and over again, is that David, as we begin to look at his life, now the next couple weeks, and today included, we're going to start to see that David's going to start to rack up some accomplishments. He's going to start to rack up some things that look really impressive. But what I want us to see is not necessarily all of the different things he's doing that are impressive, and we're going to talk about them. But what I want us to see is that David's success all boils down to a foundation he has and a question he asks, which leads him to the next thing he does. Okay, let me explain. The foundation David has is a focus on, a walk with, and a knowledge of God. That's the foundation of his life. He will do nothing apart from God. Like that's where he's at right now. Now that changes, okay, in 2 Samuel. But right now, he's focused on God. That's his foundation. And out of that, the question he asks is, what is my next faithful step? What do you want me to do right now, God? And he does that. Now, that's going to lead to a bunch of different things. And so what we're going to see today is three kind of movements of the chunk of David in this story. Okay, there's going to be kind of three segments, if you will, that we're going to see. Now, David's going to act in faithfulness in each one of those steps. It's going to lead to different things, but it's all going to come down to the same foundation he has and the question he's asking, which is, how can I be faithful? And so here's the plan this morning. We're going to walk through the text. Okay, we're going to be in 1 Samuel 16, starting in verse 14, and we're going to go all the way to the setup of David and Goliath. We're going to stop right before the actual fight. So it'll be 17:32. And what we're going to see and talk in depth about is David's actions in each movement of this story. Okay, each movement of the narrative. And we're going to see how he's faithful. Now, faithfulness looks different each step of the way because God is placing him in different things. And we're going to talk about that. But my goal, okay, and I'm going to tell you this from the beginning, the entire point of this message and my goal is that we would leave today not thinking about future plans, not thinking about, oh, if I'm going to do this or that, but being faithful one step at a time. If we left today all going, Lord, why or what does it look like for me to be faithful to you right now, today? If we all left with that question and answering it and doing it, it would be a success. That's the point of the message today. So before I get into the segments or the movements, if you will, I want to catch us up from where we were last week. Now, last week, we introed the life of David, right? And we started in 1 Samuel 16. Now, what we saw in the story, in the narrative, was David is now anointed to be king. Meanwhile, you have Saul. Saul was the first king of Israel, but he's fallen with Agag. He's fallen by not killing Agag, and he's fallen by building an altar, trying to overstepping his bounds. Now, God no longer backs Saul as king, and Saul has been told by Samuel that his time is coming to an end, and that there's going to be a new king. Now, we see in 1 Samuel 16, David is anointed by Samuel as the next king, but there's still going to be a gap of time between him being anointed and him stepping into the throne. So Saul is still king, but he's kind of a sitting duck. That's where we left off. Now, let me remind us also that as we go through this story and what we talked about last week, there's three buckets of theological words, I guess you could say, three buckets of worldview that we are looking at specifically in this story that God really harps on that we can see. It is anthropology, theology, and Christology. Anthropology is the study of humans and the effect of sin on humans. And so as we walk through the life of David, we're going to notice that David is human also, and so he falls. And when he has success, it's not actually due to him. Okay, the story's not about David. It's about God, which leads us to theology. Yeah, as we walk through the life of David, we need to have a focus on God. This story should lead us to a deeper understanding of and a more fruitful walk with God. And finally, Christology, that the life of David is pointing to Jesus. The life of David is about Jesus. Okay, Luke 24, Jesus says this. All things point to him. And so as we go through the story this morning, look for those things. Now, I'm not going to be able to every step of the way remind you or point these things out because they're everywhere. I'm going to talk about them sometimes, but I do want us to continually be coming back to those things so that we can remind ourselves of them. So, as we get going, I'm going to start to kind of set the scene here in chapter 16, verse 14. It says this. It says, "Now the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. And Saul's servant said to him, 'Behold, now a harmful spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is skillful in playing the lyre. And when the harmful spirit from God is upon you, he will play it, and you will be well.'" So let's pause. Okay, here's what's going on. I'm not going to get into the weeds about verse 14. I'll say this. There's two schools of thoughts. Either God sent a harmful spirit and it's mirroring what he did with Pharaoh, okay? So you can deal with that how you may. I don't have time this morning. I wish I did. Or God is allowing, like he did with Job, a harmful spirit to come onto Saul. Either way, here's the lesson. Okay, the lesson is if you don't trust God and you don't follow what he says he's going to do, there are consequences. That's the lesson we see there, okay? And so that's happening. What's going on is Saul, one way or another, is being tormented. Now, I'm going to assume if I was interjecting into the text, I would say or guess it's probably some type of depression or severe anxiety or something like that. But regardless, he's being tormented. And the hypothesis that his people around him come up with is, well, let's go get somebody who can play the music and kind of soothe the soul of you. And that way, when the music is playing, you're going to feel better. And so they start to look across the land who can play the lyre. Leads us to verse 18. One of the young men answered, "Behold, I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite." I butchered that word, Bethlehemite. "Who is skillful in playing, a man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him." Therefore Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, "Send me David your son, who is with the sheep." And Jesse took a donkey laden with bread and a skin of wine and a young goat, and sent them by David his son to Saul. Here's what's going on. As they look across the land for somebody who can play music, okay, because Saul is paranoid and he's proud, and he's starting to go crazy, okay, and there's a spirit tormenting him. Who do they find? David, the anointed king, who has no business by and of himself being in the king's chambers. Okay, he's a young kid from Bethlehem. He's a nobody. Yet God had his eyes on him. And Saul sends for David to enter and serve him. On David's end, think about this. David, because he was faithful with his musical ability, was now given an opportunity to enter into the king's chambers to set him up for what is to come. Now, we're about to get into the story of David and Goliath. We're about to get into a lot of other stories too, none of which would have happened if this story did not happen. This is what gives David the exposure to the throne. This is what gives David the opportunities to step into all the other things that we see. Here's the point, okay, is that none of this was David's doing. Like, David didn't have to figure out a way to place himself in front of Saul. In fact, he probably didn't want to. This was God's doing. All of this is God's sovereignty, who is orchestrating and turning the gears of the world for his goodness. And so here's my first point, is that God places us where he wants us. He places David where he wants David. It's not up to David to figure it out. God's going to do it for him. And this is a constant truth. This is like a very fundamental thing that we've got to keep in our mind as we go through the text. Because, again, this story is about God. He's the one that's orchestrating this whole thing. And guess what, friends? Your story is about God. He's the one that's orchestrating the gears of your life to put you in the places that you were at. I don't know why. It's not my job to know why. It's not your job to know why. At no point in your life is it up to you to figure out or to guess what God is up to, and then to figure out how you can place yourself in a situation to serve God. God does that. So, yes, we need to respond in a way, right? We need to, when God calls us somewhere, not run away. We have to step into that. That's all true. And if God's calling you somewhere, you better listen. And if there's an opportunity in front of you that you're placed in, you better step into that opportunity. That's what we're going to see David do. Yet, it is God who places us and God who places people where they need to go, okay? We see this in the story of Jonah, don't we? The whole story of Jonah, he's like, I'm going to go do what I want to do. I don't want to go to Nineveh. Guess where he ends up? Nineveh. God places him where he needs to go. And by the way, let me say this before I get on to the next thing. Here's just a tip. All right, if you leave here this morning, it would be a miss if you're like, oh, I really need to figure out what God is leading me to do in the future. Like, God, where do you want me to go? Are you going to move me somewhere? Here's a tip. Wherever you are right now is where God wants you to be. Okay? So don't waste time thinking about what God might do in the future when you're not being faithful where you're at now. He's placed you where you are for you to be faithful today. What is your next step of faithfulness today? That's the question. So let this truth really sink in. Okay, because what's going to happen is as this truth sinks in, your anxiety and your worry and the time spent for you thinking about what God might do or where you might want to be or what job you might want to switch to and how you get to that point and you start to manipulate the things around you so that you can make your life exactly how you think your life should look. Before you actually get to that point, if you were just still and listen to God, had a foundation of focus and walk with him, and ask, Lord, what do you want me to do today? You would be shocked where you end up. Can you imagine if David, okay, when Saul sends to get him, what if David was just like, I know, but I don't know if people know this. I'm anointed, big deal. So I'm actually going to be the next king. So instead of actually going and doing that, I actually right now need to figure out how I can kind of maneuver my way to actually taking the throne. So I'm not going to go do that because I need to figure out by myself how I'm going to take the throne. That would be crazy. Some of us are doing the same thing because we're trying to figure out what we're going to be in 5 years, and you're not being faithful to the opportunities in front of you. What is our next step of faithfulness? David's job in this entire thing is very, very simple. It's to be faithful, and we see this in two ways. The first is he's faithful in what God has given him, and the second is he is faithful where God has him. Okay? He's faithful in what he has given him, and that the thing that God uses in order to move him in front of the king, in the king's chambers, so that he's there with Goliath. Okay, the thing that God uses is his musical ability. God gave him a gift, and he stewarded it well. He was faithful to that gift, and that's what God uses. Friends, we need to be faithful with the things that God has given us. Are you faithful with your spiritual gifts? Yes. Are you faithful with your wiring, your skills? There's a gift that you have. That's what the church is that we come together and we use our different gifts. We're different body parts is what Ephesians tells us. Use what God has given you, your resources. Are you clinging on to your own money? Because your money, your gifts, your opportunities, they are not for you. Your story's not for you. It's for God. Here's the point. If you're faithful today, you would probably be shocked with how God can use that. And that's exactly what we see here with David. He's faithful, and God uses him and places him where he needs to go. The second thing is David is faithful in the situation God has him in. Let's again zoom out real quick and be very blunt and honest about the situation. Okay? Saul is the most powerful man in all of Israel. In a snap of his fingers, he can have a bunch of people do whatever he asks them to do. He's also paranoid and proud, and he's going crazy and being tormented. David is a nobody, yet he is the next king. He is the exact thing that Saul is paranoid about. Now, let's remind ourselves. Last week we saw at the beginning of chapter 16, Samuel was afraid to even go anoint the next king. Because what did he say? He was like, hey, if Saul figures out, he's going to kill me. And so David is here now in the belly of the beast. And if Saul gets a sniff that David is the next anointed king, he's going to try to kill him. And he does. That's later. And so now David is in a dangerous situation. Yet how does David respond? I want to look at verse 21 and 22. This is David's response. David came to Saul and entered his service, and Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David remain in my service, for he has found favor in my sight. How does David respond? He steps into the situation, and he is faithful in his service, to the point where he gets a promotion, okay, and he finds favor in the sight of Saul. Here's my point, is that David, because of his foundation of knowing God and focusing on him and walking with him, he trusts God's placement in his life, and then he is faithful in hard circumstances. Here's what I want you to think about. It's just because you are in a hard place in life, where you step into a hard situation or hard circumstance, does not mean that it isn't where God wants you to be. Again, the lesson is faithfulness, one step at a time. So, we're going to move on to the next section here in a second. I want to reiterate. As we look at these things, David being faithful in hard situations, okay, we need to talk about that, and that we need to be prepared to be faithful in those situations. But again, it comes down to the foundation of your life. Are you focused on God? Are you walking with him? Do you know him? If that's messed up, then you cannot go any further. So, we move on, and the next two movements that we're going to see here are both kind of in the early setup, if you will, of the David and Goliath story. And so here's what's going on. There's a place called the Valley of Elah. Okay, and that it's a real place. You can go there and see it today. I should have put a picture on the screen, but I didn't. And let me just describe it. You have, the text also describes it, but you have two kind of hills, okay, on either side, and in between is this valley. And you have the Philistines camped on one hill, and then you have the Israelites camped on the other. And what they're doing is, like, you can look across the valley, and you can see your enemy. Okay, like you see what's happening. And meanwhile, what's going on is Goliath, who is 9 foot whatever, which, Al, can you stand up? It's spur of the moment. You're what, 6'5"? 6'7". Look at this. Al sometimes talks to me, and it's just unbelievable. All right, this is going to get wheels off if I don't rein this in. 6'7". So think about 3 feet taller than Al. And here's what Goliath is doing. Pick up in verse 8 of chapter 17. It says, he stood, he being Goliath, and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we might fight together. And when Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. So here's what's going on. Okay, David, who's not in the story yet, okay, he's serving Saul. We're going to see that in a second. But there's a war going on. There's a battle. Philistines and the Israelites. And Goliath is out of his camp of Philistines. He's walking through the valley. Like the Israelites can see him coming. And as this 9-foot whatever man, is marching towards them, he's saying, somebody fight me. If you beat me, we'll all serve you. But if you beat me, or if I beat you, you're going to have to serve us. Okay, that's the setup. And that's going on, and we're going to see in a second, for 40 days, day and night. So 80 times, okay, is Goliath doing this. Now, here's what's interesting. Israel is being afraid. Now, what is David doing? And we know what he's going to do. What's he doing during this? This is interesting. Look at verse 15. We'll start in 14, actually. It says, David was the youngest, and his 3 older brothers followed Saul. But David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And for 40 days the Philistine came forward and took his stand morning and evening. Okay, now we're going to get to the next part where David steps up. We know the story. We're going to get there. We gloss over this every time we read it. For 40 days, while all of this is going on, like David is seeing it, he's serving Saul, and he's going back to feed his father's sheep in Bethlehem. For 40 days, what is David doing? He's faithfully serving his father where he is by feeding the sheep, and then he's going back to the battle site to serve Saul and to play the music there. Now, we all like to talk about the one time, like later, where he steps up. And he doesn't know about Goliath yet. I want to make that clear. He doesn't know. He hasn't seen it. But for 40 days, while he knows there's a war going on, what's he doing? He's faithfully serving where he is at. Okay, here's the point, is that David is faithful in the mundane. The reality is, a lot of times, in fact, I would say most times in your life, faithfulness doesn't look like stepping up to kill the giant. Faithfulness sometimes does. Okay, we're going to talk about that. And you have to be ready to step into that. But a lot of times, faithfulness isn't some new magical, mystical thing. Sometimes faithfulness looks slow, it looks steady, it looks monotonous. Because that's what's right in front of us. And what we do is we try to chomp at the bit. What's the next thing? I'm going to move and I'm going to go do this. And God, come on. And we try to outrun God. Okay, if you try to outrun God, it's like a dog that's trying to outrun you. You're going to get choked back on that leash. It's not going to go well for you. But that's what we often do. David here is faithful in the monotonous. Problem is, we live in an instant gratification culture. Look no further than this story. Okay, you've probably never heard anybody teach on David being faithful in the monotonous. Why? Because we fast forward to when David starts to step up and be bold. Why? Because that's cooler and more exciting and fun. For 40 days, he's bold for one day. For 40 days before that, probably more, he's faithful in the mundane. Going back and forth, serving his father, feeding sheep, playing music for Saul. Serving his father, feeding sheep, playing music for Saul. Over and over and over again. And if I'm honest, I think really more than probably anything else in this message, this is what we need to hear. Because I don't think the church is equipped for this type of thing. We like things to move fast and quick and see change. Again, it's an instant gratification culture. Okay, like I could go on and on. Our phones give us dopamine automatically. Social media, we get a notification. It literally chemically does something in our brain that's addicting, that makes us want to go back more and more and more. Okay, the rise of fast food, instant gratification culture. We buy things on Amazon that get here the next day in Cody and in towns or cities like that day. instant gratification culture. There's so many things. I can go on and on. I don't have time to go through all the stuff. Virtually everything we do is geared around, like business models are geared around, how can we give the people what they want instantly? The problem is, oftentimes, our God does not work in an instant gratification way. If we look at relationships, they are slow. Life change, often, if we're honest, most of the time, life change happens slower than you'd like. You look back 5 years ago, you're a different person, but you seem the same as yesterday. Our character is formed not in one day, but through a period of time, often by trials. Sanctification is a long process. And again, our faithfulness today, wherever we are at, is the most important thing. Are you a faithful employee? Are you showing up, working for God, sharing the gospel with your coworkers? Are you a faithful spouse, serving one another? Are you a faithful parent? Like some of us get so focused on being so bold, like I'm going to step into that moment. I'm going to be David, okay, when he sees Goliath, and you're not being faithful as a parent. What makes you think that you're going to be faithful then if you can't be faithful in the day-to-day? What is our next step of faithfulness? And as we see this story progress, let me remind you that as David is being faithful and he's serving the Lord and what's right in front of him, Israel, we see, is afraid of Goliath. They're shaking in their boots. We see this very thing happen again, verse 24. Chapter 17, verse 24 says this: all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were very much afraid. And the men of Israel said, how have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he's going to come up and defy Israel. Stop there. Again, Israel is scared to death because they're looking at Goliath approaching them across the valley. And they're like, how can we beat him? The difference is, this time, as we read in verse 24, David is there. David goes up in between the two sections I read to give probably food to his brothers. Again, the three oldest are serving there, and he's too young, so he's not. So he gives food for his brothers. And this time, he sees Goliath do his shindig or whatever. And he comes down. Shindig was the wrong word, but we're going to move on. That'd be a sight. What does David do? Look at verse 26. David said to the men who stood by him, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away kills the Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Here's what's going on, friends. Okay, Israel is looking at the man, and they are scared to death. And David shows up with the foundation of his focus where? On God. And he shows up, he goes, who's the uncircumcised Philistine? In other words, like, hey, who's this guy that's taunting God's people who's not on God's team? His focus is on God, that he should defy the armies of God is what David says. Now there's a stark contrast, right, between David and Israel. Which, by the way, don't read the story like we're David. We are Israel. There's a stark contrast. Where does that contrast come from? It comes from the foundation. Okay, here's what I want you to see, is that David's foundation is full focus on God. His foundation is a walk with him. And again, guess what? His foundation is a focus on, did I already say focus, walk, and knowledge of God. I got there eventually. That's David's foundation. The Israelites, the rest of the Israelites, their foundation is man. They're focused on who? Man, the person right in front of them that they're scared to death of. Their focus is on Goliath. God's nowhere in the foundation of the Israelites in this moment. And so here's what I want you to see, is where your focus is determines where your faithfulness will be. Israel's focus is on Goliath. And so they're going to be faithful to Goliath in that they're going to run away. They're faithful to whatever their focus is on, which is man. David is focused on God. He remains faithful to God. Listen, friends, if your focus is on man, you will serve man. You will not serve God. Okay, you're going to morph into the Play-Doh person that morphs and shapes into whatever everybody else around them wants them to be because you're serving man. The person who serves God is faithful to God and God only. And in this case, what we see is David is faithful to God, and this leads him, okay, all the way to doing the last verse we're going to read, verse 32. Leads him to going up to Saul. David said to Saul, "Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight the Philistine." David comes up. He goes, "Listen, they're afraid, but I'm looking at God. And when I look at Goliath, I see why is he so much smaller than God, yet intimidating God's people? I'll go fight him." Sometimes faithfulness will lead to boldness. David's faithfulness leads him to boldness. And so listen, you do need to be ready to be bold. There's going to be times that God puts you in a situation that requires you to step up and to be bold. You will not be bold in that situation if your focus and foundation is on man. So we do need to be ready to be bold. But again, look at the foundation and the question that leads him to this point. Are you faithful today to God? Is your focus and foundation on God? David's boldness is a result of his faithfulness. Again, let me remind us the Elon Musk thing. Like, don't be so distracted by the companies at top that you forget the foundation and the question that leads him there. Okay, if you left and you're like, I just need to be bold, that's not the application. The application is you need to be faithful. David is faithful, and because he's faithful, he ends up being bold. So yes, you need to step into it when it's there. You have to be faithful first. And his faithfulness leads him to really an interesting thing. This is going to be the last little deal I talk about. Okay, it leads to an interesting situation that goes on right before he steps up and actually tells Saul he's going to fight him. Look at verse 28. It says, "Now Eliab," remember our friend Eliab? Okay, if you were here last week, we talked about Eliab quite a bit. Okay, Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David. And he said, "Why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil in your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." And David said, "What have I done now? Was it not but a word?" And he turned away from him towards another and spoke in the same way, and the people answered him again as before. Hey, here's what's going on. David is faithful in the midst of a bunch of people who aren't. Okay, David's focus is on God and a bunch of people whose focus is on man. And when faithfulness is around unfaithfulness, it's going to make the unfaithful a bit uncomfortable. Okay, that's my last point. Faithfulness makes the unfaithful uncomfortable. And so as you are faithful to God, yes, you need to have faithful friends. Please have faithful friends around you, okay, who are going to help you navigate these things in life that come up. You need community in that way. But if God has called you to something, if God has put you in a situation, do not let somebody's unfaithfulness deter you from being faithful. And when you are faithful, you best expect that it's going to make the unfaithful people uncomfortable. So the application is to continue the fight. You answer to God. Okay, one day you are going to stand or sit or kneel before God. And in that moment, you're going to have to answer the question, were you faithful to men or were you faithful to God? So, as we wrap up, here's what I want us to see. The question, you can put the last slide, Quinn, up, the David slide. The question is not, are you going to step up in hard moments? Like, the question is not, can you work hard, all right, in the mundane moments? The question is not, are you able to be bold? The question is, are you willing to be faithful? God's not after people who are always bold. He's after people who are faithful. It's going to require boldness. It's going to require mundane moments, working hard. Okay, it's going to require being in uncomfortable or hard or even dangerous situations. He's after your faithfulness. And as we consider the best example that we can follow for this, we should look towards Jesus. Jesus' foundation was full obedience and full faithfulness to the cross. John 6:38 says, I have come, Jesus says, I have come not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. Are you here to do your own will, or the will of him who sent him? Jesus says in John 4, my food is to do the will of the Father who sent me. Jesus was fully faithful, fully obedient. In Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Right, so that Ephesians 2:8 and 9 is true. For by grace you have been saved through faith. This is not your own doing, but this is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one may boast. And all you have to do is Romans 10:9 and 10. Confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, and you will be saved. That's the gospel. And as we look at the life of David, we see it points towards Jesus, who laid out his life in full faithfulness and obedience to the Father, asking the question, Lord, what do you want me to do right now? And it led him to the cross, dying for your sins. Why? So that today you can be faithful. And so, friends, what is your next faithful step? Lord, I pray that we are a church who loves you and is focused on you. I pray that we can be faithful today. Help us when in our flesh we want to run ahead of your Spirit. Help us when in our flesh we want to manipulate and maneuver our way into certain situations. Help us in our flesh when we're not faithful to things that you have given us. Help us call us back to the gospel. Help us be a church that is faithful to you even when it seems a bit weird or it seems a bit dangerous or it goes against the grain of what normal cultural Christianity does. Help us be bold when you want us to be bold. Help us work hard in the mundane, and help us step into dangerous situations knowing that you are fully sovereign and fully in control. To you be the glory. May your will be done. Amen.